Yeah, students, good morning. So, very good morning to all. So, in this session, we are going to start our unit number 7, that what we call as a Spring MVC. Spring MVC, that is your unit number 7, as we are going to start for today's session. So, what is actually the Spring MVC? First, we'll have some basic introduction about your Spring MVC and why we need the Spring MVC. What do you mean by MVC stands for? Like this, so many questions we can just add. First, clearly we'll try to clarify. Then we will go in detail about what is the Spring MVC and what is the advantage of it and what is an are the methodologies which we are using to develop your Spring MVC, right? So first, let us introduction part will give. What do you mean by MVC stands for actually? So MVC stands for Model View Controller. So what the MVC stands for? Model View Controller. But what is this MVC? So this MVC is known as a framework. MVC is known as what? It's one of my framework where it is a sub framework. As I'm saying, MVC, right? Spring is MVC is a sub framework of your springs. Sub framework of your spring. So first, what I'm trying to say, my Spring MVC is a type of a framework to develop your web applications. That is the first point. The second point, this Spring MVC is a sub framework of your main framework that you call as a Spring, used to develop your web application. That is your second point, right? So as we already had a frameworks with us, like your previously we have taken your Hibernate and we had a framework like EJP, that is Enterprise Java Bean. So so many frameworks are available for us, but why we are moving in this Spring MVC? Is there any reason? Yes, we had, because it is one of, I can say, a powerful framework or easier to understand, and it is a frameworks of a framework, or I can say it is a head of your frameworks. Why? A reason I will say later. So that's why we call as a Spring MVC is a better approach or best method to develop your web applications. What kind of web application? Like your enterprise edition applications, like your business related applications or employee based applications, or it may be a database application. So somewhat enterprise applications already you know it. To develop these applications, we are moving in this what? Spring MVC. And this Spring MVC is actually developed by Mr. Johnson in the year 2003. Rod Johnson has done this framework in the year of 2003. And as I told, it is one of your best approach or a better approach, which can easily understandable by beginners as well as your experienced persons. Both can easily understand the things which we are trying to develop, because the reason I will say later I told already, right? And coming into how this springs is, I can say, how the springs will operate, actually what is a spring here and how they are going to create your applications. So some introduction part first, let us, right? So the purpose of string, as I already told, it is used to make your enterprise class applications with the help of POJOs. POJOs. What is a POJO? It's a plain old Java object. What we are abbreviating as what? Plain old Java object. Using that, use this one. As I told, plain old Java object as itself is an object, as itself in an object, here we don't require to create any other class path for it. Means no need to develop a class path for this object because it is a plain old Java object. And second thing is, if you want to go for any extension or implementation using this object, that command can be given by a Java language, but not other than this any language. Means it is specifically based on your Java language. We need to know. And one more thing, if you are using your POGO, we don't require any EJB. It's nothing but enterprise Java bean container where you don't require. And we don't require your application server, but we can use your container. What container? A servlet container, as such as your Tomcat or commercial any servers we had it. So these many advantages if I had with my POJO, that is the reason if you take your Hibernate and if you take your Spring MVC, we try to develop our applications using your POJO only. Because two reasons I am giving, no class path is not required to define or declare a second for it, as it is a plain object. And we don't need to have any enterprise Java beans container, but we need to have what container? Servlet container. Means here servlet code is mandatory, that you understood. And we don't require any application servers. That is the first thing. And second thing, Spring is organized in modular fashion. What do you mean by module? You know, module means it's a type of blocks, right? It's a type of blocks. But how it's going to be handled? In the name itself, we are saying MVC, model view controller. Model is a separate module, view is a separate module, and controller is a separate module. Each and every, what I can say, a future, or I can say a type of a design part which we are doing is separate for model and separate for view and separate for your controller. And Spring framework is well designed. I told already, well designed, and it is a another alternative for your other frameworks like Struts or any other frameworks which we had. Other than this, it is a better framework or well designed, or I can say easily understandable or analyzed by the persons. Right? Now, one more thing I can say about my Spring, it's a light framework. What I'm calling as a lightweight, because as I told, it is one of frameworks of framework. Like I already had some frameworks like Struts, Hibernate, EJB, JSF, their server faces, and I had Tapestry. These are all out what various frameworks which I had. But when you take this all these frameworks, compared with all this framework, my Spring framework is the best or well-designed framework. That's why I'm calling it as a framework of frameworks, and it is a lightweight also. And compulsory, using this structure, we can find a solution for different technical problems. So I can say it is one of the best framework. Now, if I want to use these frameworks, I need to deploy, or I need to use, or I need to include several modules like your IOC. What it is we can see later, but just try to get it an abbreviation of it. I need to include some modules, IOC, which we call as the inversion of control. Next, I can use sometimes AOP, aspect oriented programming, and I can use DAO, which stands for data access object, and I need to go for some configuration information in the form of context. I can use ORM, that is object relative modeling, and I'm using some web-based model view controller. And all these models which we had, we can see later if required as per our application. But in this particular Spring framework, we need to have, or we need to learn about two important things. That is, one is called IOC and one more is called DI. DI stands for dependency injection. These two is mandatory to learn. Why? You can see later. But the framework is add on different modules or adding different modules or deploy different modules. One module is having its own responsibility, but how it works over your Spring MVC, we can discuss in the coming slides. Now, if I use my Spring, what is advantages I can find? The advantages I can. First one, I'm saying it contains some already defined templates. So we don't need to work or we don't take any risk to develop your template using your template viewer. Predefined templates will be available. Example, you take your JDBC. Already a template is available for us. So what we need to do, we don't require to write a code like establishment, committing transactions, creating a statement, and closing connection. We don't require. But what we need to do is only we need to write the query to execute the query which you have given. We need to write the code only for executing query. We need to write, which saves a lot of time for your application and which reduces the risk to the client to include that much of code. If you take code only 10 to 15 lines, what is the 10-15 lines? In that, some 5 to 6 lines will go only for design purpose. The remaining lines which we are using is as original code, where that original code is mainly focusing on like what are the tables I had, right? And how I can make, what are the tables I had, and how to retrieve the data from the table, how to update. Only the basic thing is not required, but required to go for connection, opening of my connection, closing of my connection. I don't require all these things. Like example, when I take my JDBC, not only JDBC, I don't require to write any code for exception handling also, and I don't require for writing the code for statement. If you take as a general, if you come to your database, what happens for creating a connection, then committing your transaction. Commit is nothing but saving your connection, of your connection. Actually, in your JSP or in your servlet, compulsory we need to write a code for it. But here that facility is not there. So everything we can write as what we need. So that is what I can say, a lot of code can be saved. Next, second, number 2. I'm saying the Spring MVC are loose coupled. What is the meaning of loose coupled? I told already when I'm discussing about my Hibernates. So what is coupled? If I had two classes with me, class A and class B with me, as they are classes, they need to generate what? Objects to access your data and methods, right? So class A is consisting some one object and class B is consisting one more object, right? One object of my class should not depend on another class of my object of my class 2. Then they are called as loosely coupled. I can say they are independent with each other. Then that I can call as what? Loosely coupled classes. Similarly, the Spring applications, when you are developing, they are loosely coupled because of one property that what we are going to see in the coming sections. or in the coming sessions I can discuss, that is what you call DI. Because of dependency injection, maybe you are artificially, sorry, you are loosely coupled concept as discussed. Next, coming into 3, easy to test. Why? Because as I told already, we had two important things. One is IOC and DI, which we call as what? Which we call as inversion of control and dependency injection, which make our code a easier manner or minimizing the code, right? So the EJP or struts application required a separate server to run your application, but here the framework of your Spring MVC doesn't require any server. Next, lightweight. You know what is the meaning of lightweight? Not having so many what I can say classes, are not required any interfaces, or you are not going to make a force to generate so many classes and so many interfaces. Once if you try to implement as your own your Java classes and your what I can say objects, then automatically it destroys it destroys to your total system. So what they suggested, they try to go for it. So we only use with the help of POJO only. We don't take any type of transmitter for inserting, or sorry, for inheriting your class or implementation or extension. We don't require it. So that's why we are calling it as a non-invasive, or I can say lightweight application. Next, coming into next. As I told, development very fast because of some add-on features. Just now we have discussed some add-on feature, ADO, and one more is, as you can find here itself, that is your DI, and one is IOC, one is your AOP, one is your ORM, and one is your web, what I can call MVC. All these features, applications are already built in. But only the thing is, whenever we required for that, we are going to call that objects, or we are going to call that application. We are an output in that particular thing only. As per that, we will move on. So that's why. So from tomorrow, so that is your what I can say. Development as a tomorrow is a development of your Spring MVC is very useful for us compared with your other frameworks. Next, I said it's a powerful abstraction. So abstraction, you know already, wrapping of your data. So whatever the data is required, only that data we are going to show, but remaining we need to maintain a privacy. We need to maintain a privacy. What you call wrapping things we can maintain. So here we are having for Java specifications for your JMS, which you call Java Message Service, right? Next we are having a JDBC. You know what is the meaning of JDBC. Next we are having about your JPA. JPA stands for what? Java Programming API and Java Transaction API. So all these tools which we had only for specifications of your what? Servlet. But the thing is, you need to go in the hide mode, or you are going to make your thing service to be in the abstraction mode. Right, that is next. And here, last and final, I can say it provides a declarative supports. So what I mean by declarative support is when something is going on in the evaluation process, code, but I should know about the code, which one part is a view and which part is controller and which part is what? My design. So if we want to know, it is easily not understandable by the user. So that is the reason here we are going to take the help of your hyper. What? It's going to take a declaration supports. With that declaration supports, where we are going to display the, or we are going to make your supporting things like validation can be done easily, can be done easily, and formatting, because every application development, these are the mandatory things, validation things, patching of your things and your object, and you're having a formatting. All these things is required. So these are some advantages I can find with my Spring. Now, coming into my architecture, as of now, just we made it an introduction part here. What is the Spring? Why I need to go with the Spring? What are the advantages I found with the Spring? But if you take your architecture, this architecture almost all near to 20 modules we are containing. But is that all 20 modules we are using at a time? No. Whenever, based on your request or based on your application requirement, some of the modules can be taken back to your page. That is your where we are going to use as a I can solve as a in the middle of these things. I can use some what I can call a person, or I can say a intermediate person, where we are using as a EJB, persistent EJB. So where you can handle the request which is coming from the defined client, then the execution has been done, then we are going to come back to your destroy the thing. So we are having a Spring architecture roughly containing how many modules? 20. And I told already 20 modules we cannot able to push up at a time. Now coming into my first module, it's come from as bottom core container. So first one is what? A core container. So what the core container will do, just as a come back to your core container, what the things we had, beans, core, context, and especially L we had. So using these four technologies, there we are going to, or you are going to generate a code for it, right? So what, who are the persons? Once again, I'm repeating: core. Then second one is what? The, I can say as we are going to take as a core object, we are going to take your bean is the first one, and core is the second one, third is your context, and fourth is your EL. All these four objects are coming into the bus, and they are going to take, right? So whenever we required these containers, at the time we are going to use as a suitable thing. Now first move to your core container. What is core container? As I told, core container consists of your core, beans, context, and EL. That is your expression language modules. But what is the purpose of each and every one? We'll see. First, coming into my core module. So what a core module will provide? So it provides the main fundamental requirements of your framework, what we had, including the two more important things, as I told you, your SQL, that is your IOC, and your dependency injection features, right? It includes two features. It includes a core module, I'm saying. And core module includes the parts of your framework. That is a one point. Not only making as a part, so it is using two modules as a reserved modules. That is your your call as a IOC, which you call as inversion of control module, and second one is called as what? Injection, dependency injection module. These two modules are very, very important for your Spring MVC development. Next, bean. So the bean, a different type of bean classes as a factory, which is required to go for an execution time. And as next third one, I told already, context. So what is the purpose of your context? So giving some configuration information and giving information about the group of objects which we had, giving the information about your what are the things we need to access, what are flexibility we had. So something I had in my mind. All these things you can keep in your XML with the help of your expression language. Then we need to go for a SPL. That is your next module. And last final module is after your SPL, bean, context, and last and final module is SPL. As I told, is an expression language, but this expression language is deals with what? Spring. So it is a powerful expression language from SQL. That is your for querying language purpose for manipulation and object graph. purpose of the object one time. The object you have taken in the bus, object can become and it go for an execution. At the time, you need to map your objects to your respective classes. So that mapping is going to be handled by your SPEL. And next, data access, the second part. After your core, you can check one by one as I'm coming from bottom to top. So first one is what? Core container. I told about these four things. Now I'm moving into the above that one. What is the above that one? Aspects, instrumentation, and messaging we had it. But when we are using it, one just have a look here. Yes, whenever you want to go for a data access means maybe we can take the data, or maybe you're deleting, or maybe some transactions you are performing over your database, right? And this database containing mainly four transaction modules. 1 second, if you take all four modules, what are that? JDBC, ORM, OXM, XSM, and transactions. So you're not required to repeat 1 second because you hope you remember the things which you have given in my last class. But don't worry, after end of your architecture, I will show one example program or one example concept. If you are not able to understand with my side, that person may explain the same thing so that you can get it. Some students join late, so for them it will not be difficult. So it may be difficult to crack these things. So that is the reason, as I told, at the end of the session I will give a simple video which will say about your Spring framework working procedure. Then we can see the same in the next, or maybe in the next classes, to go for writing an example program. We can conclude it, right? Now what I am just making here, data access. So mainly what I am just making here, data access can be provided with different modules or components. Like first one is what? JDBC. It's a database connectivity, and it provides a JDBC application layer that remove the to-do needful to your JDBC code, to the sublet code which you have included in your JSP, right? So it is used to provide the abstraction. That is what we cannot able to see. That is the one thing. And it is not requested to go for any adding. We requested to go for only relieving, or I can say removal purpose. Removal of what? As removing the need to JDBC related coding. Whatever the code we had, we need to separate it, or we need to separate the thing. Then we can go for what? The code. Next, coming into your ORM. ORM means, it's a no need to explain this ORM. So after your ORM, we are having OXM. So what is your OXM stands for actually? We should know abbreviation. Then only we can go for what is the purpose of this one. So OXM stands for Object Extended Markup Language, and object oriented XML based language. Its main purpose is implementing of your JAXP. What is the JAXP? Is nothing but Java architecture. You know what A stands for? What? Architecture. It provides architecture of your Java with the help of your what? Abstraction layer. 1 second. And not only this, it's implementing some services like your XML beans and JIBX, which is nothing but a tool to handle your XML data from your JS or your tags. And we are using one more tool which you call IBDs. So it is also one of your tool, or I can say module, which are used to get the things as same like me. Next, coming into next, transaction. What is the transaction here? Transaction module mainly supports programmatic and declarative transaction, because the transaction name itself is saying performing by transactions. So performing of your transaction using this particular module with a special interface we call, our special object we call as POGO. Using that, we can just go for it in the evaluation purpose. Next, coming into the web. So two things we have done. So one is about your core container, one is about your Java database. Next, we are moving into what? Web. What the web is containing? It contains once again the four modules: WebSocket module, WebMVC module, web, and web portlet modules. So what is the main purpose? We can say that is web module provides basic web-oriented integration features like multi-part file upload functionality and initialization of IOC number or IOC container that add web container application context. So suppose what he's saying is when you take your web model, when you want to connect or when you want to upload a multi-part file, then here initialization of your IOC container and servlet listeners and web oriented or web related an application, we had these three, and in these three one person is expertise in the deployment of your web. So deployment of your web application, so that web application if you want make to take out and it come back to your USB, it will work over here. But as here it is a time based thing we are doing, at the time we need to make your the initialization part by using your WebSocket, or you can say module. We can implement our module the things which are required. And similarly we need to have WebSocket. So socket is used for as a programming concept like your client server application. When they are doing, when a server need to sit in the client, you need to know the what the address. So that address mechanism is provided, as we can say binding, socket binding is going provided. Next, web portlet module. So web portlet module, whatever we had, provides MVC implementation for a portlet environment and mirrored functionality of your web servlet. So the portlet is nothing but what? Whenever you want to make your mirrors of your functionalities, means a copy of your functionalities, or you want to make your environment as a portlet, then we need to use your web portlet module. So how we are using, we can see the thing as when the application implementation part will come, at that time we can discuss. And among this web and among this your database connectivity and among your core container, we had some miscellaneous things like AOP, that is aspect oriented programming, and something we call instrumentation and messaging and aspect, we call it as a miscellaneous. So it contains a miscellaneous components, like four components we had, right? First component AOP, that is we call as aspect oriented programming, and this implementation allowing user to define method interceptors and pointouts to cleanly decouple the code and functionalities that would be separated. Means as you take your AOP, so when you are going to design any application, so you want to make that some supports, you are implementing a code for part 1 and part 2. So that part 1 and that part 2 is going to be decouple, or you can say if coupling is not there, fine. If coupling is already existing for these two, we need to apply decoupling. So immediately that can be removed from your one application code to another application code. That is what a separation can be done. Next, second, aspect module. So what is the aspect module is? It is one of your module and design oriented programming framework, right? And it is one of your best module integration where the powerful model and powerful objective oriented programming are it can be used. Next, instrumentation. So this instrumentation is using to support your different class loaders while implementation of your certain application servers. And messaging is one of the most important module here, because everything is carried over your execution is going on. So in the smartphones, actually what happens when you are sending a text oriented information, right? So for that, as you know, you need to handle one protocol, it's completed. So it not only that, it also separates the messaging, also separates some annotations like at the rate symbols, at the rate symbols for routing and processing of your NOSP. And not only that, it is going to use the MOUs, MOCs, not only with your, what I can say, limited to the persons, it can be utilized or it can be used by anyone. But while executing this particular socket programming using your WebSocket, you need to have some sub protocol. We need to have some sub protocol, or I can say one of the protocol minimize your the things which we are doing. So like that, I can use my messaging. Next, Spring IOC container. I told already there will be two important concepts when you are doing things. One is IOC and one is a DI. Dependency injection and what is another one? Inversion of your control. But what they are? So the Spring container, as I told, is a core. Is a core of your Spring framework. You know already, right? So if you consider this as the Spring container, then we need to have what? The two important things. One is container of your IOC and one more is called as what? MUU. Sorry, one more component is called what? DI, dependency injection. Two important things we had. But using your dependency injection now, I'm trying to unlock how you are going to do it, right? We'll see this how to make your dependency DI to be active. You can see later. First, let us know what is your IOC container. So a Spring container is a core of your framework, and this Spring container is contains different frameworks like objects, or write them together, or configure them and complete manage their complete life cycle to be used for creation as well as your destruction, because same as your Java. So in Java also you are creating an object at your runtime. So similarly here, a Spring container also perform almost all everything as a code, right? The Spring container uses one more approach, which we said two approaches we can cover. So two approaches we have seen, and the two approaches is called, one more approach is called DI, dependency injection, and it is used to manage the components and make the application success. And it is going to use what? Using the help of your container, uses the concept of dependency injection. It is going to complete its tasks. So that is Spring controller. And remember, in the Spring controller itself, everything will be generated. Like if you send one particular onion in it, so the onion will be in the same size. So onion will be made in such a thing that it cannot be make anything different there. So we need to maintain the same thing, and we need to create the data which is required for it, and we need to create some classes for it, and we need to execute the thing over here. Finally, we need to generate an object. This is the program which I'm saying. So Spring, Java Spring is using as Spring controller, which is a more important thing when you are developing your applications. Now, when I'm providing this Spring, there will be different type of containers are available, like maybe your bean container, that is your EJP. You may contain another container like your what I can say, which we can generate applications, right? So similarly, Springs provides the two types of your containers usage. So what is that? Simple container, basic support for DI. So I'm saying number of times this one, but as next page or maximum next slide, we may contain about your DI data. What is the DI stands for? Dependency injection. We can just find in the coming sessions, right? So how it is there, and uses the Spring container. Once again, a Spring concept is containing two more special container. One is carrying your classes and carrying your deep support for DI. That container we are naming it as what? Bean factory container. And one more container which we call as application context. We can call it as an what? Application context container, where it is used to assign some, what I can say, container, some package, or I can say interface. What is that interface is known as org.spring.string f. Like this is your second one. Now, before going to this design pattern of your dependency, or I can say about your IOC and dependency injection, right? So we'll just have one small thing which we have. I told already, as per this up to now we have given so many things to you, right? Now I'm going to make one simple video. I'm going to show you. If till whatever I discussed, that video we can cover within a fraction of seconds, and it gives everything a brief information. What is the necessity of your springs? Just have a look of this video so you can understand some more things. If anything is missed by my side, there we can cover the things. Just everyone, please try to concentrate and listen.
Java developer and you are working on Servlet and JSP, maybe Sturge framework, and if you are looking for something solution, so we are talking about Spring MVC. So welcome to There is no Learning, my name is Praveen, and let's talk about Spring MVC now. So what exactly Spring MVC is? You might have heard about this from a lot of people. Let's move to Spring MVC. Let's learn Spring MVC. So why everyone is moving to Spring MVC? It's because it's damn easy to work with. Again, so there are lots of reasons why we are going for Spring MVC. The first one is it's easy to learn. Second, it provides you that flexibility that you can change it. And third, it's separation of concerns or separation of the modules. Example, we have different views, we have different models, and then we have different services to work with. Spring provides you all those features. And if you have already worked on Spring, you know the power of Spring, right? And this is Spring MVC. Now, when we talk about Spring MVC, we can create amazing websites using Spring MVC. I mean, nothing different from what we do in Servlet and JSP, but doing the same thing in a very effective way, right? Now, if you remember, when you work with servlets, what you have is you have created the servlet class, and then you say extend HTTP servlet, then you have to create a method which is service, right? And then you send a request, a client sends the request, goes to server, and that's how it works. How Spring MVC works is, again, when you learn these things, you might find it a bit difficult to grasp everything. But trust me, if you make one simple application or even a small code in Spring MVC, after that, if you want to expand it, it is very easy. Okay, so let's start. So let's try to understand the architecture or how exactly Spring MVC works. So just for that, what we'll do is, let's imagine we have certain controllers here. Okay, so we have certain controllers, right? So if you go to your server technology, every servlet behaves like a controller, right? And your JSP behaves like a view. So let's say we have certain controllers here. Now what controllers I'm talking about, let's say we have a login controller, we have a logout controller, we have add controller, we have multiplication controller. So let's say we have these four controllers here. Goes to your favorite file, which is web.xml file, right? In that XML file, we mention for which request you want to call which controller, right? That's what we do in your normal server technology in server MVC, right? But so the problem is, if you have lots of controllers, sometimes it's difficult to manage all the controllers, right? Let's say we have 15, we have 100 controllers, so it is difficult to manage all the controllers. Second, each servlet will behave like one controller. We wanted something called as multi-controller. That again, your Spring MVC will help you. So if you try to convert the same architecture in Spring MVC, what you can do is, we have a client machine here. Client machine sends the request to the server, and server says okay. Now we are not using normal MVC. We want to use Spring MVC. That means to handle all this controller, we need one more controller who will be the front controller. Okay, so with all these controllers, we have one more controller that is your front controller. Then you will think, Okay, now we have to provide one controller. You don't have to do that. Spring MVC will create a controller for you. You just have to create your controllers, but the front controller will be given by Spring MVC. Now that run controller in Spring MVC is called as dispatcher subnet. That means all the client requests which goes to WebXML file should know that you are using Spring MVC, and all the requests should go to your front controller, which is your deploy, which is your dispatcher subnet. How can you mention that? So in this example, I just mentioned that for all the requests, you have to send the request to dispatcher subnet. It's that simple, right? Again, if you know how to do it, right? You can create a subnet tag, you can create a subnet mapping tag, and you can do that. Now, once your request goes to dispatcher subnet, then what? Now, dispatcher subnet will think, okay, the request is for login. I should call a login subnet. I mean, I want to call a login controller, right? Request is for add. So you have to call add controller. Request is for logout. You have to call logout controller. So dispatcher subnet know which one to call. But then there is one more issue here. The issue is how would your dispatcher subnet knows which controller to call? Now your dispatcher subnet is not a Superman, right? It will know everything. So what happens is when request goes to WebXML file, it sends your request to dispatcher subnet. Now dispatcher subnet needs a configuration file. So in that file you have to mention which request to call which controller. But then you will say that's not good, right? Because we were very happy with subnets. But to that, no need for the next of file. But what Spring MVC provides something called as annotations. So all your controllers should be annotated with the help of controller. So you have to use a controller annotation, and that's it. So with that controller annotation, every controller will have some mapping steps. Again, we will see that when we do programming or the practical implementation. But every controller will have a mapping, right? You have to only mention in that configuration file that in which package you have all your configuration and you're done. I mean, in which package you have controllers. Of course, right, these are Java files, so you'll be having all these things in one particular package, right, or maybe multiple packages. So you just have to mention which package you're working with. That's it. Dispatcher subnet will specify, okay, we have to go to this package to find the controllers. You don't have to do that. It will be done by your Spring MVC. Okay, so let me repeat. Client sends a request goes to WebXML file says, okay, we have to send all the requests to the dispatcher subnet, and dispatcher subnet will check, say, okay, we have to send that request to login controller. Now that login controller will do some processing, of course, right? When you call a method, it is done for with the help of it is done for the processing, right? So after the processing, as a client, what you need? Some page, right? So that controller will return you a page. Not exactly. That controller will give you the name of the page. Because it might happen that you have lots of pages, right? So when you say you are building a website, you will be having lots of views. When you say views pages, which a client sees, right? So there will be lots of pages. Which page to call? That's a question. Second, see, we have a page, right? It needs two things. First, which page to call. Second, what is the data? Now, data will be generated by your controller. But which page to call? You have to mention that in your controller. It will mention the page name, it will mention the data. That data and the page name goes to the dispatcher subnet. Again, your front controller. You see that? It's not direct controller to page, it's through dispatcher subnet. So the controller will send the response to the dispatcher subnet. Now, dispatcher subnet will get two things, the data and the view name. It will call that particular view. Okay, and it will also add, so your view technology will fetch the data from the controller. Make sense? And then that page goes from dispatcher subnet to the client. And if you can see, everything is done by dispatcher subnet. As a client, you're only interacting with your front controller. You don't even know how many you have on the backend side, right? Everything is done by your front controller. Then you think, everything is good, but why do we need, why your dispatcher subnet should know which view to call? It's because it may happen that, so let's say for time when you're using JSP as your view technology, In future, if you want to change your view technology, let's say you want to use theme leaf, if you want to use maybe some other velocity or frame marker, if you want to use all this view technology, you just have to change the configuration file. You just have to change the configuration file for particular sublet, right? You can change it from JSP to theme labels like this. Change your views and just change the configuration. Your controllers will not even know which technology, which view technology you're working. So that is a sufficient of concern. Your controllers don't know what view we are using, and your view technology don't know what controllers we are using. That awesome. It's that flexible, right? So Spring MVC is awesome. There are lots of features. I feel Spring MVC is like a magic. And as a developer, we are magicians. More how to do all this request mapping and how to work with the controllers, how to create this configuration file, how to get a client, we already know. We'll see all those things in the technical session. I hope you're liking this video. Please hit on the like button and do subscribe because more subscribers will, I will get more motivated and I will make more videos. So do subscribe and thank you for watching.
So this is somewhat introduction, or I can say the basic thing what we are doing in MVC. So he's explained in a nice way the designing point of view, which we just now has given only theoretical portion about what is advantages with my Spring MVC and how the Spring architecture and what are the modules when I need to use applications, that we'll discuss in the designing portion. Just is nicely explained what is the main purpose of your Spring MVC with a small intro video. So in the next session, I'll go with some of the properties. That is, I told there will be two important properties we need to discuss. That is IOC, and one more is a DI, that is a dependency injection. So these properties we will see, and we will go with how to design or how to write a small code to implement your MVC, that we can see in the coming session. So hope you are done with the today's session. I hope you understood. Any clarifications, any doubts you want, please let me know in the chat box, dear students. If you have any clarifications, any doubts, just you go ahead. Yes, so everything is clear. Just I made it very slowly for today's session because as it is an intro portion, we need to just understand about your Spring MVC clearly and clarifyly. So hope no doubts from your side. So it's time to give your attendance. I request everyone, please post your attendance in the chat box. Then you can. Thank you.
Sir, please, you didn't upload the units yet.
Yeah, I can't get you. Can you repeat 1 second? Mohammed?
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, very good morning.
Sir, I told you yesterday I asked you to upload the units, and you told me you're going to upload it.
Yeah, I already uploaded. Up to 6 units I uploaded. Please go to your e-content. There you can find all the PPTs. Already done. Fine. It's okay. Please check once in your e-content. I already uploaded yesterday itself, or 1 to 6 units I done with. Please check from your side. Thank you.